Okay. So we are now recording, so ignore everything I said before. We'll get started now. We're lucky to have Dennis Wiggins here to talk about mushrooms. I know what a mushroom is. I know there's three types: one that'll kill you, one that you can eat, and one that'll make you see God. I don't know. That might be killing you. It depends on what type of person you are. But I'm excited to have him talk about that. We're excited to continue to bring the series, not only starting to do in person for some people, but also to as each one goes along, we get better and better with the technology where people who can't make it here can still enjoy our educational series. So that's one of the things that's come out of our pivoting with the Zoom of being able to expand our reach. So we're glad to do that. Of course, we always want to see you in the gardens. They're in their fall glory right now. Temperatures are wonderful. Things are about to get busy because in the middle of November, there will be a number of projects kicking up, not just in the formal gardens, but along the trails. So keep an eye out on that. My pitch always is, if you're not a friend of Reynolda Gardens, we encourage you to become one. It is important. It's it's part of the third of our budget that we need to raise. That's our operating budget. So it's an important thing, and it's a great way to keep this place free and accessible to everyone in our community. So I always encourage people to become friends. And you get our newsletter, and you get access to the talks. And a couple weeks ago we did a leaf casting class. So you got a discount on that if you did that. And then Michelle Hawks is actually going to be doing a fall container workshop. So you can bring a container. Now we have limited you to a 20-inch container. Don't come in here with one of these big old honkers from an estate. But you'll be able to do some nice fall containers. So we've got plants, we've got soil, so that'll be fun. And oh yeah, Michelle, I mean, you ought to pay just to spend time with Michelle. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Dennis. I'm going to sit here in the background, kind of as tech support, so God help us. But I'm looking forward to learning a bit more. Maybe one day I'll get comfortable enough to forage on my own.
Yeah, we'll have a go.
Yeah, but let me go ahead. I'm going to continue. I think we should be good.
Excellent.
Just go forward.
Okay, sounds good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dennis Wiggins. And did y'all know that the first mycologist in the United States was a Moravian? And I'm going to have to put my glasses on. His name was... I'm going to go ahead and leave it on, I think. Thank you, though. Anyway, his name was Louis David Schwinich. And I'm not pronouncing that correctly, probably, but he identified something like 1,100 different mushrooms in this area. Yeah. In fact, on the there's a huge map in the Moravian archives, and I've actually got an appointment and went to see it. And it'll tell you where the forests were, what kind of woods there were. Like I was looking for elms. I don't know if y'all know what elms are about when it comes to mushrooms, but and it talks about mushrooms too. And then also there's a big exhibit up at Hanging Rock, which is an area I used to hang out a lot and search for his mushrooms. So that was the first one in the United States. So let me ask y'all a question. Why are y'all here today? Besides to learn a little bit about mushrooms. Okay. Anybody else have some ideas? Thank you. Yes, Jim? Well, all the new things that we're learning about mushrooms are starting to blow me away in a whole nother kind of way. And I've been knowing about mushrooms for a long time. This is a great book for a book that is on the cutting edge of what you can do with mushrooms. Radical Mycology. Peter McCoy, he's great. Just as a side thought. So I have this little thing of magic, a world of mushrooms, and I have the Earth or some planet right there, right? Why do you think I might have that? Mushroom spores are incredibly strong, and tolerant of all kinds of extremes. They pass, like if you find a flying squirrel over in France, he's been munching on a truffle, which is a kind of fungus, and so he sits there and digests it, and the spores make it right through his system until they come out again, and then they reproduce. And that's one of the ways they get moved around. Also, they've been known to actually be found in space. They can survive between planets, etc. Yeah, so spore, just a spore. Spore can survive in space. So it's really sort of crazy. My name's Dennis Wiggins, and I first learned about mushrooms, and I'm going to be holding this the whole time, but I first learned about mushrooms starting in about 1977. And I was going to culinary school, and the chefs there were a lot of the European, and they really loved it. I was a forager. I would go out. I was a hiker. I wasn't quite yet a forager, a little bit, but not really. And they would say, "Bring back mushrooms, any mushrooms. These are the ones we really want." And while I was there, I did bring back some mushrooms, but the mushroom that got the most attention was found by another student, and he found some sets or porcini or bolete edulis. It's just my favorite mushroom. I don't find them around here. Other people do. But it was Anthony Bourdain was talking to the chefs. So we went to the same culinary school. And he had the attention of the chefs for a while there. Then I was gone for a long time and going to Miami and other places and really didn't get out much. And then came back, and a friend of mine, Eugene Wooten, suggested, let's go looking for mushrooms, because he was a forager of sorts. And we've been looking for mushrooms together for 35 years now. Different times, different places. He just brought over some mushrooms the other day that he thought were a particular kind of mushroom, and there was no way I was going to taste them, because it was not clear that it was that mushroom. But we trust each other, because I've never gotten anybody sick. The first book I bought was by Orson Miller. Orson Miller was a really great mycologist, and he created these keys, and this is the book right here. This is the first book I have. And he created keys that if you sit down and go through it, you will learn all the different aspects of what defines the name of a mushroom. Oh, yes, I can. Well, okay, so this one is radical mycology. I was talking about a second ago. And then this is Orson Miller. He's passed on, and a lot of things have changed with mushrooms in the last couple of years. One is genetics, because they're not in the same family anymore. It's so frustrating to go out there. A lot of mushrooms that everybody thought were found, that they found in Europe were the same in America, like Morchella escalente. But it's not. It's a Morchella americana now. And but there's a lot of mushrooms. They're slightly different in taxonomy, but also sometimes whole families they move across. So let's see. People moved it. Basically, it didn't. The genetics didn't fit what the observation, the eyes, had seen. So it may have looked like one kind of mushroom, but it was a different whole family of mushrooms. Another one that was just a different genus, I think. Correct me on that, John. Is I don't know if you've ever seen an Amanita caesarea or Caesar's cap. That's actually Amanita jacksonia. It's not the same mushroom, and it doesn't taste as good, according to what I hear, because I've never had them in Italy, where you can find those somewhere. So let's see. I've been selling mushrooms to restaurants around the area since 1986. So I've sold all kinds of things to restaurants. And I stopped a couple years back because they required a license and everything. And since I didn't go out that often, I just couldn't see the price of paying for this license to do it. At the time, it was like $600. I can do it now probably, but I just don't get out and sell that much. I don't collect that much volume. Let's see, I got injured in 2012. I had a pretty strong injury and I couldn't work. So since no one was allowing me to work, I went walking in the woods and I found all kinds of things. It was so much fun. It was a wet summer. I found that summer probably about 65 pounds of chanterelles and 350 pounds of Myitake. And so Myitake is a hen of the wood, delicious mushroom. So And I mentioned a second ago, I'm very conservative. I'll get to this in a second. I'm very conservative. So if I'm not sure about it, I've thrown away so many more pounds of mushrooms than I've eaten. It's not funny. But in reality, all mushrooms are edible. Some you only eat once, and that's it. So if you're new to mushroom hunting, is anybody in here new to mushroom hunting? Okay. Do you want to learn about it? Okay. Well, I highly recommend a couple of different things. One is don't depend on pictures. You need to have other evidence. Get yourself a mushroom book. This is probably the best one for this area right now. It's Mushrooms of the Carolinas. It's not the best book, but it's awful good book. And it does define the mushrooms here, because there can be variations between here and Indiana. Orson Miller was up the Midwest, northern Midwest. So his mushrooms didn't always match the ones that I saw here in a lot of ways. We'll be talking today about a lot of different mushrooms, culinary, deadly killer mushrooms, detoxifying mushrooms, and medicinal mushrooms. Technically, well, I can talk about it. You don't have to believe the thing I say, and I highly recommend that you check for yourself. You know, in the US, we follow the British way of doing things. We're mycophobic. Everywhere else in the world, pretty much, they honor mushrooms. It's part of their culture. But here in the United States, we're sort of scared of it. So we don't have anywhere near as many people going out and looking for mushrooms. In Europe, a couple of years back, people started scaling back, you know, going in the cities, not paying attention to their genetics of the generations of knowledge around mushrooms. And then all of a sudden they wanted to come back out. And all of a sudden there were a lot of poisons in Europe because they didn't take care. They thought it was neat. It's not safe to eat mushrooms unless you know what you're looking at. So anyway, you know, part of the culture is all the amazing fairy tales and things like that that showed up over time. One of my favorites is about fairy rings. Have y'all heard of fairy rings? Okay, fairy rings are basically where a mushroom, group of mushrooms starts to grow and it grows in a ring. And every year it's a little farther out, and a little farther out. The largest in the world is 2,000 feet around. It's over 700 years old. It's in France. Pardon? There's quite a few different ones, but Merisma, it's not a common name mushroom, is family. I think that's it. Is a family that typically shows up and is used. But you know, the thing about fairies is that you know they come out, they come and sit on the toadstools and watch everything that's going on because the satyrs are dancing in the middle at night. And you'll notice that over time it gets barer and barer there in the middle because the satyrs have been dancing there at night. Now, if you go in there in the middle of the night and you cross into that circle, you can get stopped. You get stuck there, and you either dance till you die or you go crazy. So another mushroom, huh? Say? Oh, it is. It is. Amanita muscaria is another mushroom that has a lot of folklore and history around it. It also has a lot of spiritual properties too. It's got 2 different poisons in it that are toxic, but only in very small amounts. So it gives you a stomach ache. It's got 2 poisons that also get you very hot. So muscarine, which is anyway, it's a substance that gets you very hot. It's like hallucinogenic mushroom. In Hindu, it's the mushroom of immortality. In other areas, or the divine mushroom of immortality. And in Grimm's fairy tales, it shows up. I think of Alice in Wonderland. That's an Amanita muscaria. In Siberia, let's talk about misogyny. This is awful. But in Siberia, what they would do is shamans would brew up a tea of Amanita muscaria, and I think some other herbs, etc. And then the women would drink the tea, and then they would pee, and then the guys would drink the pee. And what they would do was they would filter out the toxins. Isn't that wonderful? That's the one thing about me, you get all sides. So only 5 to 10% of the mushrooms out there are poisonous, but that's that's a huge percentage to risk your life with. 20% are edible. Interesting is 2004 report said that there were 1,154 edible mushrooms in this one area where the International Food and Agricultural Organization was doing a report on that area of edibility, and that's how it was found. I can get off on topic, so don't let me get too carried away off subject. But one of the things I want everybody to really understand about mushrooms is that they are interactive in everything. They're in our guts. They're on our skin. They help fight things like autoimmune disorders on our skin. They help a lot of things in our body. They also do the other opposite. You know, they give you toe fungus and things like that, or other kind of fungal pieces. But if you're balanced, then you don't have that happen. They're in their bloodstream, believe it or not. They're in your brain. The whole biome, each one of them has the same microbiome. And so then you look out in nature, and mycelium, which is about 40% of soil, mycelium is the plant, if you could call it that, of mushrooms. And so, you know, that plant of mushroom does so many things in this world that you don't realize. One is it holds moisture, huge amounts of moisture. And so if there's trees out there that there's one thing I haven't mentioned yet, but there's a huge relationship between trees, which is another book you might want to learn a little bit about, is getting a tree book, and mushrooms, and especially good edibles. So if you look like morels, find an elm tree. Yes, they're all dying, but if you have one, you can find them. They're this big, and you know they'll, you know, especially if they're starting to die, then there'll be morels under there a lot. But what happens with the trees and the mushrooms is mushrooms do two things with trees that I know, and probably more than that. One is they exchange nutrients with the tree. They exchange water, nitrogen, other things they pull out of the soil. The hypha pulls out of the soil. These mushrooms actually grow between the cells of the roots of plants, and they exchange that information or that nutrient. And then, of course, mushrooms don't have any source of sugar. So what happens? Chlorophyll comes down, and it goes in the mushroom, and comes their sugar, their growth. So they're everywhere, and you don't even realize it. Okay, so when you're looking for mushrooms, you use all your senses. You use your eyes. You might look up in the top of a tree and see a mushroom, or you might see a dead branch up there, and it still has leaves on it, where the other ones don't on the same tree. And especially if it's a red oak, I'd be going right for it, because that's where I find my Mycologist, or hen of the woods, which is one of my favorite mushrooms, because it's starting to kill the tree. I found Mycologist. Oh, I'll tell that in a second. I can get off that page. One, textures also. So there's textures of mushrooms. They'll tell you a lot about how firm it is, such as a chicken of the woods. You know, you can tell the texture of it, and it'll tell you if it's going to be edible or not. Because chicken gets very tough, very woody if you leave it too long. So does well, quite a few other mushrooms do too. So you want to touch things. You're looking at elm tree. If you want to find an elm tree, it's similar bark to other trees. Feel the bark. Is it spongy? It's an elm. If you've identified the bark generally. Now, my favorite thing is I'll be walking through the woods and I'll use my nose. I've been a chef for a lot of years, so I think about food all the time. And so when I'm walking through the woods, I've always got my nose on alert. And I can't see as well as I could when I was younger. So when I'm walking through the woods, and I'll smell mushrooms. I know the smells of morels. I know the smells of Mycologist, a bunch of different ones. The most interesting one for me is when I smell Chanterelles, because usually there's a fair bulk of them, and this beautiful little fruit, apricot fruit. Well, what it does is, if it's up a creek above me, it'll roll down that creek in the humidity. And humidity holds smells really well. So it'll roll down that creek and go, okay, I'm going up that creek. I'm going for those, because I'll know that they're there. I try to follow, if the wind's blowing a certain way and I smell something, I'll try to follow it. Okay, and on listening, you know, what do you want to listen to? You want to listen for the berries, because they're going to tell you where the mushrooms are. Yeah. Okay, I started learning about something else that I'm really interested in, medicinal mushrooms, many years ago when I was going I was working as an assistant to Santi Tom, who was the master at Golden Flower Pastry School. He knew a fair amount about nutrients, especially mushrooms. And so he got me on the trail of starting to hunt them since I was always out in the woods anyway. Have you ever wondered how like penicillin and other antibiotics work? Does anybody know how they work? Basically, they come from fungus. Fungus, what they do is they'll land on something. They'll send out hyphae, which are little tendrils, and that hyphae will exude enzymes. Those enzymes digest what's there, whatever it might be, and then it's got to bring it back up into the mushroom, and it goes straight through the cell walls. It doesn't have a stomach or anything. But the thing is, you don't want to just take anything in, do you? So the gatekeeper is the antibiotics of the mushroom, whatever those might be. So think of it that way: is the antibiotic as the gatekeepers bringing in things. Unfortunately, our genetic structure, mushrooms are more related to us than they are to plants. We have 30% of the same genetic structure as mushrooms. So most of the studies you're going to hear about, people sit there and talking about like this mushroom does this, that mushroom does that. Those studies are, we really can't talk about that much because you have to get all kinds of confirmations from the FDA, et cetera. So anything I talk about today, I'm going to tell you up front, a lot of it, because no one puts money into mushroom research, except in the last couple of years, it's starting to really jump up. Independent people are doing it. But your pharmaceutical companies aren't going to do it because they're not going to make any money. Although something like 30% of a lot of pharmaceuticals come from fungus, but they're not going to do basic research into things. So they're not going to make the money. So that's one of the reasons. So a lot of studies just get stuck in the mice stage. A lot of studies are done in China, Korea, Czechoslovakia, other areas, Finland. So, okay, let's get this rolling a little bit. Am I boring you yet?
No.
Oh, good, good. Never know. Okay, this is a lionfin. One of my favorite mushrooms. I found that one right in Winston-Salem Violet. I found one every year at the same tree. So go back to that tree. It's really worth it. Of course, now the tree's down. But so lion's mane is a great mushroom for a lot of things. One is what I've got there. See that crab meat in the middle? But that's lion's mane. You just strip it. It really mimics crab meat in a lot of ways. You cook it up in a little butter, garlic, a little shallot, and then deglaze with a little white wine and reduce it a little bit. You don't have to worry about getting it overcooked. And then throw a little bit of butter on top of that just to make a little butter sauce. It's delicious. You can do crab cakes. You can do it a lot of different ways. So that's one thing about those mushrooms. From a medicinal standpoint, what it does is it enhances the growth of neuron growth factor, which means more nerves in your brain, which has the most nerves, but then all over your body too. So when I was injured a couple of years back, I got burnt, and my hands had grafts on them. And so the thing is, when you put grafts on hands, that means that the arteries and the veins have to connect to the skin somehow, and the pathways aren't anywhere near as big. And that means nerve pathways aren't either. And so, so the nerve pathways aren't as big, and so you don't really get that much feeling back in you. You get some. Mine's at 80%. Because I started taking one cordyceps and the other was lion's mane mushroom. Cordyceps. This is the other mushroom I started taking. It's one of the most interesting mushrooms in the world to me. Oops, sorry. Here it is. Cordyceps. Cordyceps mushrooms are really interesting mushroom to me. It's what it is actually it kills its host insect, and sometimes it makes the insect do bizarre things. Like there's one where zombie ants, what it does is it goes into the ant and lives there and grows. The ant goes about its business, but at a certain time that ant climbs the nearest tree as high as it can go, and then the mushroom sporulates and sends out the spores. So that's why they call them zombie ants. The mushroom that I was taking is a it's the cordyceps, or I don't try to pronounce the Latin anymore. It's making me mad because they changed that again. But the cordyceps is sinensis is a wonderful, healthy mushroom for your body. And so in France, excuse me, in China, the emperor there, the only person who could get this mushroom was he. They wouldn't let anybody else have it. It's found on the Tibetan plateau. And oh, I'm sorry. Cordyceps? Yes, it's everywhere. That's the Tibetan plateau. Of course, that's the most expensive thing in the world. Any organism, live organism, $25,000 a kilo. So basically, they've been able to mimic it and actually have strains now that are better than the strains now that are better overall than this right here. They've been looking at it for quite a few years to make that happen. And so that's how I buy it. It's about, well, it's expensive, but still, it's really wonderful to eat. It's very sweet too. Let's see here. So you see all the different insects that the cordyceps gets into. That's just a small number of them. Okay, the next mushroom is chaga. Now, chaga mushroom, I'm gonna have to go back. There we go. Chaga mushroom is a mushroom that is found in mostly only on birch trees, every 4,000 birch trees. And it's found in Siberia, which is where a lot of them are harvested. It's also found in Alaska, Canada, any northern countries. And most of the northern people used to make tea out of it. And in Siberia, they make tea, have it on the stove all year long because it's a real woody mushroom. It's nothing like, you can see it grows right into the tree. And you bang it up and you put it in a pot and you boil it for 3 hours. And then you'll start to have a tea. And it's actually a really tasty tea. It has no bad attributes to it at all. No bitterness, no nothing else. But it has a lot of wonderful attributes to it too. It's basically, it boosts your immune system. I remember Highlights magazine. Does anybody, I know a couple here probably remember Highlights magazine. I remember reading in there that the oldest people in the world were Siberians. Well, you wonder, this also has a lot of anti-aging properties in it too. It has the ORIC value on this mushroom right here is 146,000. It's right at the highest thing on Earth. That's one thing about mushrooms. They're all extreme. So it's the highest, it's oxygen radical. What is it? Are you looking you're looking at me? What's your question? Okay. ORIC is basically the amount of antioxidants that has and its ability to be able to clean out oxidative cells. But, you know, they use it for HIV, for the flu, and it's anti-inflammatory, and it's also does something else here. It actually helps you filter out toxins, including radioactivity. So don't ever buy any of the chaga mushrooms from Alaska, because after Fujitsu, whatever, that meltdown of the plant, all the winds came over and they found a real big uptake in the chaga mushrooms there. Any questions? Okay. Shiitake. It's one of my favorite flavor mushrooms. Love it. But that's not what we're going to talk about. Yeah, it is. Okay. So shiitake mushroom is a real interesting mushroom because it was first mushroom to have a pharmaceutical made from it sort of directly. And I can't tell you exactly how that works, except that it's called AHCC, and it was approved in about 1993 in Japan. And what they did was they used it for several different things. One is to boost your immune system. So they'd give it to people getting ready to go into elective surgeries. Now they would stop a week ahead because it tends to thin your blood a little bit. You don't want to have that happen when you go into surgery. So keep that in mind. If you eat mushrooms, a lot of mushrooms before any surgeries, you shouldn't. But anyway, so what it do is it help keep away those superviruses, the pseudomonas and other things you get in hospitals. So people heal faster. They didn't have as much working on their immune system. The it also is prescribed for cancer, and but generally it's antiviral. Reishi mushroom. Y'all have heard of a reishi? Oops. Well, I'll find it in a second. There we go. Reishi mushroom. These are reishi mushrooms here. There's two different kinds in North Carolina that we know of, and I don't think this has changed yet. One is the Ganoderma Lucidum, and the other is the Songe. The Lucidum is found on hardwood trees. This one was on, no, I think that was on a hardwood. Anyway, and this one right here is on a, working on this. It's what are the woods that are starting to die up in the North Carolina mountains really bad? The conifers. No, hemlocks. So they're found on hemlocks in huge numbers. I've walked through forests. A friend of mine has some land up there, and I walked through this forest, and there must have been 500 pounds way up in the trees, just going like ladder steps up the trees. And they've been there for some of them for several years. But they're the most of all the medicinal mushrooms. They're bitter and flavor wise, so they're not a lot of fun to drink unless you can match off the bitterness. But but it has the most broad spectrum of uses of any of the medicinal mushrooms. Helps with stress, cholesterol. That's interesting. Insulin keeps sugar at bay, so it doesn't overwhelm your insulin. But the interesting thing about cholesterol, instead of like statins, what they do is they help you excrete cholesterol, but you really do need it for your brain. So where it really needs to be is in your tissues. And so it helps you reabsorb it into your tissues. Now, remember what I said about I'm not an expert or anything. And this, then if I'm quoting anything, it's from mouse studies or other studies. There are human studies too. I just don't have them right here. I have them in this book right here if you want to look them up. One of these books. No. Anyway, it's right there, actually. That's a great one. This is also great right here. By the same guy, Robert Dale Rogers. Okay, so anyway, a couple of years ago, you know, I had this whole situation happen for me, and I started noticing also that I had high blood pressure, and that's not a good thing. But I didn't want to take any blood pressure medication. So what I did was a friend of mine told me hibiscus drops blood pressure 7 to 14 points. So okay, I start drinking hibiscus tea. Remember Red Zinger? And so I started drinking hibiscus, and then I found this mushroom, the Chaga mushroom. What was this way? That mushroom right there. It's rare here because this is a birch tree. It grows up in high elevations. I found it at 5,000 feet. And I brought it home, and I was like, oh, this is so cool, because, you know, I don't expect it to find here. But anyway, I took it home, and I started making tea from it. It was very good. And it was just basically to keep my immune system up through the winter. And I said, no, I can't keep doing this, making two things like this. So I started thinking about it, because I'm a chef. I tend to like to mix things up. So I added the chill that Ganoderma tea, or excuse me, the Chaga tea, and put it in with the hibiscus. And then I had to think, okay, now I got to make it taste good. So I added oils. I added lime oil, orange oil. In some ways that people make you happy. The oils, some people believe that it helps make you happy, etc. I don't know enough about the science of it. But also Ceylon cinnamon, which is the least toxic of all cinnamons. Star anise, which is the main produces the main ingredient in Tamiflu. And I made a tonic called Papadox Tonic. And so anyway, I had that on the market for quite a few years. And it was pretty tasty. A lot of people thought it was. So You know, for me, it helped. I don't have high blood pressure anymore. I don't age as fast because, oh, I didn't tell you, I put 5 other mushrooms in it, the ones I just talked about. So I wanted to get something that addressed the brain and the balance of the body, and then energy and endurance. And so that was design of it. So okay. Now this is one of my favorite mushrooms, edibles. It's found at the base of trees and on the roots around the tree. I found there's a grove of red oak in Winston-Salem that is over 300 years old. Probably some of them 400. They're huge. And I went into these woods, and it's just a strip along the creek. And I go hiking a lot. So I went into these woods, and I found a tree that had this huge number of Shiitake mushrooms on it. I'm like, whoa. And I wish I had the picture. I filled a bridge that was there. It's like here to John. And it was literally just big old bunches of these Shiitake mushrooms. I found 120 pounds on one tree about 7 years ago. Now they're old, but then there were bunches all around the tree, but they were getting that tree. They were really living off that tree. And that's the one downside to a lot of these mushrooms. They're parasitic. And so this mushroom right here is parasitic. That 700 grove, like maybe 8 or 9 very large old red oaks. I think they're probably all dead. It doesn't take long. There were red oaks up in the Swan Mountain Cabin up above Joyce Kilmer. I used to go there, and the hogs kept running through and rooting out truffles and whatever they can find by the roots. And they were 700-year-old oaks. And then I went back 3 years later, and they were pretty much all gone. And what was left were covered with these absolutely beautiful sulfur shelf mushroom, which is chicken of the woods. So they're delicious in roasts, soups, stews. They're very meaty. You know, I'll blanch them and freeze them, or you can freeze these things straight into the freezer, and they hold really well. So I've had them in the freezer for a year before. Just keep as much air off as possible. Okay. Oh, I wanted to show you that there are some lookalikes. There's 2 real close lookalikes. This one on the right, this is a turkey tail here. I mean, I'm sorry. This is the Shiitake or hen of the woods here. This is a Berkeley Polypore. Absolutely gorgeous mushroom. I didn't know what to do with it when I didn't find it. My friend Eugene did. And he brought it over and said, you want to use this? I said, yeah, check it out. And I didn't have much time then. That happens in everybody's life. So I didn't get a chance to key it out. But finally figured out it was a Berkeley Polypore, and that it's really good when it's young. It's good when it's young. I'm not going to say really good. But I'd put it in the yard because I didn't have time, and it really smelled bad when it was dying and old. Okay, okay, so now, how many here go mushroom hunting? Two? You go to take pictures. I go to take pictures, and I'll take Chanterelles and lime things like that, because I know it's really easy. But the Chanterelles, my owner and I FaceTime, but I would cut it over to see if it could go. Oh, good. Yeah, because Chanterelles do have a semi-lookalike. I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. That is a sort of scary mushroom. It's called a jack-o'-lantern, and it's really tough on your body. Feed a lot of it, it'd probably kill you. Okay, well, so the first mushrooms you want to start with. I'm going to start not in the order of the easiest, but I'm going to start with morels. Morels are, if you meet a morel hunter and you ask them to take you hunting, they won't take you. Not to their best spots. They'll take you somewhere new. Oh, I don't know. I haven't been over here. Do you have a place? But they won't take you to their spots, because the problem is that then people go, oh, I know where some morels are, because in North Carolina, I've been told that it's because we don't have enough potassium at the top of our soil, but I don't know this. This is by an apple grower, and they don't grow in huge amounts here. If you get a pound or two, you should be very happy. If you get 10 pounds, that's a once a year find, unless you're out all the time, or you know a bunch of areas. So you just don't find a lot here. Now go up to Michigan or Indiana, Illinois. I saw a picture of 3 guys carrying these coolers out full of morels, full, and there was something like 600 pounds. It was ridiculous. They're also very expensive if you buy them wet, or, fresh or dry. Yes. Botulism mushroom. The fungus. Yeah, well, botulism is everywhere. It is literally. The thing is, do you ingest enough of it? Like it gets into, I don't remember being taught when I was in school, they taught that you got to be careful if a can gets expanded because it lives in an anaerobic or non-oxygen environment. So you have to be really careful with botulism. But it doesn't manifest as often as you think. But it can manifest you can actually eat it and it can sporulate and grow in there and give you a week later, terrible gastrointestinal stress. You'll remember it if you live. Yeah, and there's another aflatoxins, really interesting, and they are just as deadly as botulism. So okay, so morels, first mushroom I would recommend you check out because it's the first in the spring. Well, not quite. There are other mushrooms that live through the winter, etc., but this is the one you're going to look for. How close are we? How much time have we got left? Uh-oh. Yeah, I'm going to speed up a little bit. Okay, morels. Basically, the easiest way to know morel is one, it has a honeycomb top. I don't have a picture of it up here. Sorry. Well, I do. Sorry. There it is. There's my son right there. That's my dog that collects mushrooms. But it can be, but the way you know and the way it's safe is to go ahead and cut it open. You'll find snails in the hollow stems. But stems are hollow. If they're cottony or are filled up at all, then it's probably a verpa or gramitra, which are false morels. And, so just to give you a heads up about that, I love stuffing morels with scallop mousse and frying them. Okay. These are chanterelles. Chanterelles are also the next one I would consider looking for. They can be bright orange to dull tan. The gills, when you look at the gills, they're sort of flattish and they trail down the stalk. It's a very important attribute right there. If they cut hard off, then you have to be very aware because they're probably not chanterelles. And the lookalike is a jack-o'-lantern, which I don't have a picture of. A jack-o'-lantern is a little bit more orange than these right here, and they grow in a clump and they grow under trees, hardwoods usually. And there used to be a most amazing little thing. There's a huge tree out going into Wake Forest University, and on the right there was a tree. That tree was there, and it had, oh gosh, 7 or 8 huge clumps of these mushrooms under it. They're delicious in soups, sauces, duxelles, stuffed in fish, chicken, or just with eggs. Yes. Very variable. No, not necessarily. But it also, if you have any more light coming in, canopies changed. That took out my biggest hunting grounds, was a canopy changed. And a couple of trees went down and a lot of light in. And chanterelles just don't come up there anymore. Made me cry. I left 15 pounds out in that area because I didn't have a use for them. So. Well, I doubt the health department here is does that. If you know a member of the mushroom club, they will help. Their Piedmont Triad Mushroom Club. I should put a little thing in for it because it's a great club. We used to have 30, 40 members there. COVID happened, and we would cook mushrooms up. We would have forays. We do log inoculation workshops. So there's no one formally that does that in Winston-Salem, but there are people who have the ability to do that. One is the chef down at 1713 Curtis. 1713? 1703. Okay, Curtis. I don't know Curtis's last name. Also, there's at the Cobblestone Market, there's a farm, Kathy and, oh shoot, Borrowed Land Farm, and they have their certifications there. Because I know they collect wild ones and sell them there. You can get chanterelles there. Oops. These right here are turkey tails. They're the most studied of all the mushrooms out there. They're a shelf mushroom, and they're wonderful medicinal. They have a lot of good attributes to them. They're easy to pick. They're easy to spot. There's a white version that is not that same mushroom. It's a false turkey tail. So avoid that one right there. You'll see it. It's bleached out compared to these right here. It also doesn't have white bottom. This has the white bottom. And then that is the oyster mushroom. I mean, that is the jack-o'-lantern mushroom. It looks like a chanterelle. So just to get an idea. And that's actually, it's not, those caps haven't opened yet. See how thick they were though? Oops. Okay. So I'm just going to whip through some more stuff. I don't want to overburden you or anything. There's one thing that probably people are interested in. It's become really visible lately is the use of hallucinogenic mushrooms. And there's a lot of studies out that have been done and the value of it. The whole thing started with a guy named Wasserman who went to Mexico and actually went with a shaman, and they put him through the whole experience of it and came back and read it up in Life magazine. That turned on a lot of people to it, and a lot of people started going down there for that. Then Timothy Leary came along and said, turn on, tune in, and drop out. The only problem with that is all the people who are doing great research into use of anything like that for the body, because he was so a vocal advocate for the spirituality of it and just the fun of it, I guess, it got shut down. And finally, Richard Nixon signed the last piece where no federal funds can go towards any kind of hallucinogen research. It's too bad because I know one study, yes. Oh yeah, well, no, actually it's been, now that's changed. People realize that there's a huge advantage to this because they started looking at the old studies that were being done. Like one study, people who had smoking cigarettes, 70%, going through a process of, I don't know exactly what the study was, but 70% of people could stop smoking, it would be no problem. Basically, psilocybin causes your brain to fire differently and it rewires it. And when you can rewire, you're not stuck in the same patterns. And you can stop drinking, you can stop smoking cigarettes. You might be a drug addict, but you could that can tone down. They're doing all kinds of studies in this, and they're showing amazing results. For PTSD, it's supposed to be the most effective thing for PTSD of anything out there. In Silicon Valley, how did people keep on the edge of innovation constantly? You want to know how? They microdose. So what that is when you take just a little bit, you can't get high on it. You don't get high on it. It's not the idea. What it does is it opens up the pathways in the brain again. So, yeah. Yeah, one study, actually, 83% of people who had major alcohol issues were able to cut back to what wasn't considered a major issue or level. Okay, so other tasty mushrooms out there. Shaggy mane. Don't drink alcohol with it. It'll give you stomach aches. Field mushrooms like pink bottoms, which are Agaricus, Bisporus, or I think they changed the name of that too, which is found in fields. And if you turn them over, they've got a pink bottom. And you're going to go, if you're going to take this from me, you're going to go and make sure that that spore print is brown, though, right? You're going to check your book. You're not going to go out there and just do it. Puffballs. I may have one literally that was this big, right down the street from my house. And you get it when it's fresh and young and cut it open, no yellow, pretty white. That's what you're looking for. And then you can marinate it just lightly in a nice marinade or Asian, and then grill it. It's crispy, it's delicious. Bicolor boletes. We found a lot of them for that dinner at the Mushroom Club. They were delicious. They're a bolete, and so they're a member of my favorite family, which is bolete edulis, which is the sept or porcini or steinboletes, depending on which language. You've heard of seps possibly. It's a wonderful mushroom, real meaty, tasty. You've got tooth fungi. We talked about a lot of that. You've got deadly fungi, Amanita virosa, Amanita pilates, and brunescens. The thing about those mushrooms is that people get a hold of those and they cook them up. Especially, there seems to be a problem in people coming over from Asia, and they think it's something else, and from their experience, and then they cook it up. It's the worst death you can have. Toxins in there are incredibly high, and pardon? It's the worst death you can have. Oh, the Amanita virosa, pilates, brunescens. There's other amanitas too that have toxins in them, but those are the really bad ones. Angel of Death, what a nickname. And so the thing about that is that you'll eat it and you'll get violently ill, of course, for a day. And then you start feeling better, and then people notice you're turning yellow because your liver and kidney are now shut down. And to survive, you have to have a liver transplant a lot of times, depending on how much you ate. The only thing that can do anything about it, I've heard, is milk thistle. I thought that was interesting. You can't get it here, you can get it in Virginia. So hopefully you have it happen up there. Okay. Oh, okay. So we talked about some of the things that mushrooms do. Their mycelium, they help the trees talk to each other. They also talk to other trees and exchange nutrients with other trees. And that's amazing that they actually have a relationship with other trees. Is this conscious or what? It also breaks things down into the simplest elements. So you think of dioxin, it breaks it down, oxygen and hydrogen and chlorine, and et cetera. So those aren't available anymore in such nasty ways. And so now we can use it for nitrogen uptake, whatever is being broken down. So that's what mushrooms do. In fact, if we didn't have any fungus, the trees might go down, but they'd never rot. They would sit there for thousands of years because they wouldn't have anything. Rot is the mushroom. So one mushroom, agaricon. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wind this up. If you want to know, I'll just say that my favorite mushroom out there is Strombolomyces flaccopus, just because I love the name. And it's a bolete, and it's black. It's called Old Man of the Woods. So the one thing about mushrooms that I always recommend people is I love to cook mushrooms, and I always cook mushrooms because you don't want to eat raw mushrooms. There's a couple that you can. You got to know what they are. And the grocery store mushrooms, the white ones, or even the portobello, baby portobellos, don't eat them raw because they have garic acid in it, and garic acid builds up in your system over time. And so you shouldn't eat a lot if you do eat raw. You can, but they're the largest thing in the world. on 2.4 miles. There's one that's 2.4 miles. It's a Amanita Melia. No, not Amanita. Armorelia Melia. It's a honey mushroom. It's also the fastest thing in the world. It's faster than a cheetah. Spores coming out faster than a cheetah, 70 miles an hour. They shoot them. It's just amazing. So they're extreme of almost everything you can think of. And the one thing when you get to go mushroom hunting, even if you don't find anything, yeah, so you always find some pretty. And that's just what I find peace and pretty. That's my grandson and my wife up there. We were looking for mushrooms that day. And this is years ago when I found a whole log. You didn't even see them all, but there was a whole log of chicken of the woods. And that was Cleo, my dog at the time. So, two different ones. They grow under hardwoods. Truffles grow under a lot of different trees. Depends on what kind. In North Carolina, the ones you're probably talking about are black truffles or white truffles, because we grow them both here. The black truffles grow under, they start them out on a nutwood, no. They grow on oaks best, but they start them out on this other tree that I can't remember. They grow on hollies, actually. They're actually doing experiments because we've got a real bad problem with a blight around it, and it's killing them all. So they're trying to find trees that are not susceptible to that blight right now. I'm not an expert on that. I've just talked to people about it a little bit. You've heard about it, John? Yeah, there's a blight that's really hit a lot of the mushrooms around here. No, excuse me, the truffles. The other one that's most exciting in North Carolina is a white truffle, and it's growing in eastern North Carolina. And so she is starting to get a lot of mushrooms out of the soil. She did a lot of work on that land. I got to meet her at some event, and it was pretty amazing what she's doing there. Yes, you can. And you know, the Italian white truffles, $4,000 a kilo. That was last night's price. And then you know, black truffles, $1,800. And I think that's a pound actually. Anyway, so well, the most exciting one is morels. So when you go up to, on a elm tree, you just can be amazed, especially if it's starting to succumb to the Dutch elm disease. The tree, literally, it'll be hundreds of mushrooms under a tree that's only about this big. So elms also are loved by quite a few different mushrooms. Questions? More questions? Do I grow mushrooms? Yes, I do. No, I grow them on logs, and I grow shiitakes on logs. I've grown, oh gosh, one little lion's mane on a log, and I've grown some oysters on a log. And then I'm getting ready to do bluets, but I want to do them in a different way. So what I'll do is put hay and manure into a big net, or active net. And but first I'll take and actually soak it in a barrel, anaerobic bacterial sterilize it. Then I'll put it in a big fenced in like container sorts and inoculate along the way with bluet spore. Supposedly it's really easy. That's a good mushroom. Any other questions? Yes. They don't grow naturally here. I think they're pretty much Korea originally. And so, you know, they don't grow here naturally. They have naturalized in certain areas where people grew shiitakes. I know a place in Sugar Grove, but yeah. No, you wouldn't, most likely. Yeah, there's different kinds. There's warm weather, cold weather varieties, slightly different flavor. Any other questions? Yes, miss. Last question. Right. Sure. Well, Trad Carter, who's down at Mushroom Mountain in South Carolina, he's the best. He's one of the best mushroomers on the East Coast, and he follows Robert Rogers, who, remember the drink I told you about? Robert Rogers actually approved of my drink formulation of mushrooms. He thought that was good. No, not that one. But he's friends with these guys, Peter McCoy, also Paul Stamets, who's one of the biggest mushroom guys out there. Yeah, and he's got this book right here is his. It's a great book. I think we have an updated version of it. But Trad Carter, then the other way is go to the Piedmont Triad Mushroom Club and say, when are y'all going to have a meeting? They might have one more meeting. I don't know, but probably not before winter, because it's sort of a dead season for mushrooms. You can find them. You can find lion's mane out and hidden inside a crook of a tree. It'll overwinter. So thank y'all very much. Hope y'all enjoyed. And y'all online too.
Thank you, Dennis. And who knows, maybe once we get past COVID and we can actually start doing more in person, we can actually have the Triad Mushroom Club out here, maybe some cooking demonstrations.
Oh, that'd be nice. Do you have a kitchen to work out of?
We'll figure something out. We can get some stoves set up, some little Coleman stoves.
Okay.
Because I remember taking a mushroom class when I was a kid at the Research Science Center. I hated mushrooms until we did a class like that with natural mushrooms. I had a cooked sauteed in butter, and that's when I started.
Oh, it's so simple. Just a little butter. Yes. We did that meal. Yeah, that was delicious. Would you send that to me? Yeah. I will. I'll talk.
With that being said, we'll wrap this up. I'll see if I can get Dennis to share me a list of his top books and we'll share that out with the board as well. So thank you, everyone. And I'll see you.
Okay. Actually, that's a good idea. I think if that's the way, I'm gonna share it.
Is this
Yeah,
the
but-
angel's death?
No,
It's not.
no, it's
Oh,
probably an Amanita cokery. Let me put my glasses on.
Actually,
'cause that's, I thought this was the,
Yeah, that's probably a cokery. Pretty little veil, isn't it?
oh, it's beautiful. I mean, this is to me, that's a mushroom perfect.
I actually tasted that veil one time. It's actually got poison in it too, but you can taste it. It's vanilla. It was delicious.
Ha, okay. How do you spell that?
Cokery,
Yeah.
Amanita,
Yeah, I can
A-M-A,
do the Amanita. It's
a cokery, C-O-K-E-R-I, I think.
C-O-K.
K-O